What's up, you guys? It's Graham here, and you're probably going to want to get ready for what's about to happen. Despite concerns of upcoming tariffs, the S&P 500 falling to 4-month lows, and recession fears coming back into the spotlight, there's one topic that's either going to make or cost people a lot of money, and that would be cryptocurrency, or more specifically, Bitcoin. Believe it or not, this was the best performing asset of 2024 and of the last decade, averaging a 230% annualized return. It's officially being included in a strategic reserve, and it's gaining a lot of attention throughout the most crypto-friendly administration in history, who's even suggested eliminating the capital gains tax entirely. This is why it's really important that we break down exactly what just happened, what this means for you, the fall of the US dollar, and the impact this is about to have on all things money. Because even though it's easy to assume that prices just keep going higher, there's a lot that's going on under the surface that most people are completely unaware of that you'll need to hear about as soon as you hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already. That's all I ask for, and in return for doing that, I'll do my best to read and respond to as many comments as I can. So thanks so much, and also big thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. Alright, so first, in terms of cryptocurrency, we have to talk about something that most people know very little about, and that would be a strategic reserve. In terms of how this works, think of this like a bit of a countrywide emergency fund, where stockpiles of certain items are kept safe in excess for a time of need and to prevent prices from skyrocketing in the event of a shortfall. Like, it's really no different than someone holding back rice, beans, and water in case of a natural disaster, instead of rushing off to the grocery store to buy toilet paper for $20 a roll because they're running low. And in terms of the United States, this is actually pretty common for just about anything you could think of. For example, we have a strategic petroleum reserve to help with the cost of oil in case of a supply disruption. We have a national defense stockpile that can help build infrastructure in times of emergency. There's food and water reserves, pharmaceutical reserves, currency reserves, and even gold reserves, if they're still there. But there's not yet a cryptocurrency reserve, and that could soon change. Recently, proposals have called for a Bitcoin reserve that could help hedge the effects of inflation and be a long-term store of value if the United States is able to accumulate enough of it. How? Well, at least when it comes to Bitcoin, the thinking is that first, it's limited to a supply of 21 million, meaning as demand increases, supply is going to stay the exact same. Second, it's decentralized, so no one entity controls it. Third, it's been compared to digital gold, making it similar to what we already have. And fourth, other countries are already embracing it. From this perspective, if the United States wants to remain competitive, protect the value of the US dollar, and increase their independence, then a Bitcoin reserve might make sense, especially because this could be sold or transferred anywhere in the world without relying on the traditional finance system, and it could be audited in real time by anyone on the blockchain. However, I will say that some people are rather upset over the most recent announcement, which if you haven't seen it yet, you're going to want to take a seat. According to Trump's most recent post, he states that a US crypto reserve will elevate this critical industry after years of corrupt attacks. My executive order will move forward on a strategic reserve that includes XRP, Solana, and Cardano. I will make sure the US is the crypto capital of the world. And then less than an hour later, he adds, and obviously Bitcoin and Ethereum will be at the heart of the reserve. Now, even though most people hear executive order and think to themselves, oh wow, this is 100% gonna happen any day now, keep in mind, most likely a president's not gonna be able to enact a strategic reserve without congressional approval. And I say most likely because there's probably some unusual loopholes out there that any lawyer would theoretically be able to argue given the loose regulatory framework around cryptocurrency to push practically anything through. But aside from that, realistically, any sort of cryptocurrency reserve is going to have to pass very strict proposals that dictate exactly what is held, for how long, and who's going to buy it, agreed on by both sides. This means that people who are very anti-crypto are going to have some choice words to say about this, especially when it comes to the downsides. For example, number one, critics argue that cryptocurrency doesn't exactly have an essential use case, as in it won't directly help support the economy in time of a crisis. It's not like oil that could be transferred to fuel pumps, materials that could build houses, energy to power facilities, or people on standby ready to fight. In fact, Warren Buffett famously said that you can't value Bitcoin because it's not a value-producing asset. If you buy something like Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency, you don't really have anything that's produced anything. You're just hoping the next guy pays more. Which brings us to second, in the event of a price crash, if the government owns a lot of Bitcoin, they might be expected to intervene and continue buying in to keep prices elevated with taxpayer funds. Third, some people have voiced concerns about whether or not cryptocurrency would actually be a net benefit for the entire country, or just provide an economic backstop to private investors who want a high rate of return on their investment. And 4, a hack would be absolutely disastrous, especially if all it takes is one person not verifying their key phrase. Not to mention, nearly everybody has started to question whether or not a reserve fund should hold anything other than Bitcoin. For example, the CEO of Coinbase tweeted that just Bitcoin would probably be the best option. Simplest and clear story as successor to gold. If folks wanted more variety, you could do a market cap weighted index of crypto assets to keep it unbiased, but probably option number 1 is easiest. On top of that, Tyler Winklevoss said that other cryptocurrencies aren't suitable for a reserve, and that only one digital asset in the world right now meets that bar, and that digital asset is Bitcoin. Or others believe that XRP, Solana, and Cardano were only listed because they're American-made projects, and this is a way to support domestic innovation. However, I do want to say on that logic, if supporting domestic innovation is a requirement for a reserve, why not then hold a reserve fund of the S&P 500? Where do you draw the line between supporting domestic innovation and buying Dogecoin because it's up 9,000% over the last 5 years? This is why some people believe that mentioning anything other than Bitcoin is simply a nice gesture that could later be ruled out by Congress, while others believe that this is only the very beginning and prices are about to skyrocket. Although even though some of this sounds a bit pessimistic, the reality is that this could be absolutely monumental in securing the United States and Bitcoin is a global powerhouse, and when it comes to that, here's what you need to know. Although before we go into that, I gotta say, it's absolutely shocking how much time people spend managing their finances and optimizing their investments while putting no time whatsoever into making sure they're protected online. For example, most people don't know this, but anytime you browse the internet, your activity is recorded and sold to the highest bidder. Your IP address tracks your every location for use by advertisers, and without encryption, your information could be vulnerable to hackers. That's why anytime I'm online, I protect my data with Surfshark VPN, who is sponsoring today's video. For those unaware, Surfshark VPN works by encrypting your online data to help secure your personal information, mask your IP address, and prevent hackers from identifying your city, country, and download history. Or to put it simply, a VPN swaps the real location of your device with a new one, giving you the ability to virtually travel anywhere around the globe. This means anytime I travel out of the country, I could swap my location back home so everything works normally. Or if I connect to a random Wi-Fi network, I can encrypt my data so that it's next to impossible for anybody to intercept. On top of that, Surfshark's Clean Web feature also blocks ads, trackers, malware, and phishing attempts, allowing you to surf the web safely. Plus, they don't track, store, or monitor what you do online, so there's no connection or activity logs, and all of your activity is completely private. So if you're interested in protecting yourself, you could get an extra 4 months for free when you go to surfshark.com/Graham. They've also got a 30-day money-back guarantee, so it's risk-free for you to try it out and see what you think. Plus, this also works if you want access to Netflix content that's only available outside of your country. So again, get started with the link down below in the description. Enjoy, thank you so much, and now let's get back to the video. Alright, now in terms of establishing a cryptocurrency reserve, there's one aspect that I see people completely miss, and that would be the demise of the US dollar. After all, if there's one thing that's certain, it's that your money is going to be worth significantly less 20 years from now than it is today. And if you want to see just how bad this has gotten, check this out. Back in 1913, the value of $1 had the same purchasing power as $100 has today. And over time, your money just falls further and further behind. Meaning, if you just kept $1 from 1913 and saved it under a mattress, it would have the same purchasing power back then as a penny does. Let that sink in. This is why earlier in the year, Congress was briefed on the dangers of continuing in a system where dollars constantly lose value. And if you're curious how that went, here you go.
One of the benefits of the crypto economy is that it creates some counter incentives on the part of the Fed to do that kind of policy because people will flee to other kinds of assets. And that sort of market competition is something that I think will ultimately shore up our monetary policy and keep the dollar where it rightfully ought to be, which is as the dominant reserve currency it's been for all of our lives.
Essentially, what he's saying here is that if the United States diversifies its holdings and starts using a globally recognized store of value that isn't subject to inflationary pressures, then perhaps it could remain a lot more competitive. Maybe the Federal Reserve starts taking that into consideration. And as a result, we would remain a lot stronger than we were able to without cryptocurrency. Otherwise, the alternative is that over time, the rest of the world could switch away from the dollar. And if that happens, of course, all of these are what-ifs, and recently the US dollar has actually done incredibly well. but not for the reasons you're probably thinking. I mean, just look, on the surface, the dollar has more purchasing power overseas than it did 10 years ago. More countries are using the dollar, and more nations than ever are holding on to it. However, some economists have pointed out that this isn't necessarily due to the US dollar doing amazingly well, but rather the rest of the world falling behind, and therefore the US dollar looks that much better in comparison. That's why if the United States can combine the value of the dollar with something as decentralized as cryptocurrency, they could keep money afloat that much longer, especially because if people leave the dollar, where else are they going? This is likely why more companies and countries are beginning to take matters into their own hands and keep Bitcoin as a reserve. For example, El Salvador and the Central African Republic adopted Bitcoin as their legal tender. Elon Musk and Tesla are reportedly holding on to over $1 billion worth. Institutional investors are beginning to pile in. And one website breaks this down perfectly. As we could see, 164 entities currently have Bitcoin on their balance sheets as a replacement for holding on to the US dollar, and 8 countries actively own it, including one that's somewhat unexpected, China. Even though they have very publicly banned cryptocurrency trading and later mining, rumors are starting to suggest that they might begin embracing their own Bitcoin reserve as a way to reduce their resilience on the United States. Of course, even though these are only rumors, it does make sense that China would look into creating their own strategic reserve if the opportunity presents itself. And if they do it, I have a feeling a lot of other countries are going to follow. Not to mention, in terms of demand, this doesn't even include the Bitcoin ETF, which in its first 2 months passed Michael Saylor's entire stockpile. Inflows passed $30 billion with 1 million Bitcoins held, and with only 450 Bitcoin being mined per day, there just might not be enough Bitcoin for everybody without the price eventually going higher. However, the downsides to something like this is that with announcements that continually happen on a regular basis, it could be the subject of insider trading, like this person who mysteriously bought 200 million worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum on 50x leverage less than a day before his announcement, and then right after the announcement, guess what? Started selling and made a cool $6.8 million worth of profit. Combine that with the fact that the SEC recently said that most meme coins aren't securities and therefore not subject to regulation, and it's become apparent that the entire industry is becoming the wild, wild west, where you could buy or sell at your own risk. Although in terms of my own thoughts and what this means for you, here's what you came for. Overall, I have to say, when it comes to that first part, I am a fan of a Bitcoin reserve. I've said this before, but there have been plenty of comparisons made to that of gold, which is limited by the amount that could be mined from the earth. And in this case, some projections believe that pretty soon, Bitcoin is going to become harder and scarcer to access. Of course, in terms of why this gives it value, Investopedia notes 6 attributes that all successful currencies must have. And that would be scarcity, divisibility, acceptability, portability, durability, and uniformity. Now, in terms of how Bitcoin stacks up, it ranks the highest in every single category except for not being issued by a government, which some could say that's actually for the best. On top of that, Blockworks even went so far as to say that the Bitcoin supply of 21 million is simply a boomer myth, and the true amount of Bitcoin in circulation is actually significantly lower. For example, the creator Satoshi Nakamoto amassed more than 1 million coins, of which only 10 have left, and that was more than a decade ago. So in essence, 7% of the entire Bitcoin supply is completely inaccessible. In addition to that, Cointime Economics estimates that anywhere from 3.9 to 4.8 million Bitcoin could be considered lost. This estimate includes Satoshi's holdings as well as the zombie coins, bringing the total supply down to just 17.1 million. All of this creates the perfect reason for the United States to create a Bitcoin reserve, scoop up as much as they can, and then use that to back the dollar. But as others have said, I am extremely hesitant about putting anything other than Bitcoin in a reserve, and it seems like a lot of people agree with this. Now, on the flip side of that, the downside to doing all of this is that so far, Bitcoin has really just been at the whims of the market, and it's never gone up during a time when the economy is going down. Like, it's really hard to justify investing in Bitcoin or anything for that matter when you're losing your job, your income's going down, and you're uncertain about whether or not you could pay your bills. So that's why Bitcoin usually ends up falling when the rest of the market also ends up falling. This is why I believe in the short term, Bitcoin is going to behave much like the stock market. And that needs to be considered in terms of its volatility. All of this is the reason why I've taken the approach of just dollar cost averaging a Bitcoin ETF on a regular basis with money that I could afford to lose with a small part of my portfolio. If it's worth more money one day, great. And if it's worth less, Well, you know what? That would suck, but it's not the end of the world, and buying into a Bitcoin ETF like this is incredibly easy to do without really thinking about it. Oh, and lastly, if there's one more piece of advice I could give you, it's don't buy the hype and don't sell the fear. I bet there's going to be plenty of short-term spikes over these next few years that are really tempting to buy into because you're like, oh my gosh, this changes everything. And then, as it does every single time in the past, it eventually subsides and prices fall back down. This is why you always gotta just stick with the plan, stay with the course, keep a level head, and no matter what, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already. So with that said, you guys, let me know what you think down below in the comment section. I really appreciate it. I will do my best to read and respond to as many people as I can. Thanks so much, and until next time.